Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Line-Miller, your host. There are all kinds of meat products out there, and we're going to talk about a very innovative one today. We have Paul Shapiro with us. He is the CEO at the Better Meat Co. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, Pam, how you doing?
I'm doing great. We're so happy that you could join us today and give us some insight into the Better Meat Co. and what you're doing.
That's very generous of you. So if you think about the fact that the planet is not getting any bigger, now humanity's footprint, of course, on the planet is getting a lot bigger, but the planet itself remains the same size. And one of the primary ways that we leave that footprint is through our food print, principally in the amount of meat that we eat. It just takes a lot of land, a lot of water, a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of animal cruelty, and more, in order to raise and slaughter billions of animals for food. The problem, though, is that even though most of us know that we'd be better off both from public health and environmental reasons if we enjoyed a more plant-based diet and ate fewer animals, meat demand is going up, not down. It's going up in China, up in India, up in Brazil, all the places where it's going to matter the most in the future, meat demand is going up, not down. And so I believe that while it would be wonderful if people wanted to switch to eating bean and rice burritos and lentil soup and hummus wraps, great foods, I love them myself. But, people seem to like meat. It's kind of like saying, it'd be awesome if people wanted to walk and bike more. But, people seem to like to drive. So we need to make cars that don't rely on fossil fuels. Well, we can make the meat experience without animals. And just like there are many ways to get energy without fossil fuels, wind, solar, geothermal, nuclear, and more, there are many ways to get the meat experience without animals. One of them is to make plant-based meat, right? So to take crops like soybeans or peas or wheat and convert them into things that look and taste like animal meat. However, there are a lot of deficiencies of doing that. One, plants don't really taste like animals, so you have to do a lot of things to them to make them taste like animals. And that means that these products are going to be a lot more expensive than animal-based meat. So if you think about it, a Beyond Burger is made from peas, but peas are much cheaper than beef, but the Beyond Burger is much more expensive than beef. And the reason is because it's not really just made from peas, it's made from a tiny little fraction of the pea that has had a lot of processes subjected to it. Now, if you don't want to use plants, you can go to the animal kingdom, right, and grow actual animal cells in what's called clean meat or cultivated meat. And that's a great technology. Unfortunately, it is not yet ready for prime time. And by what I mean by that is that it's not ready to go on to fast food menus and big box grocery store shelves, which is the scale that's needed in order to make a dent in the problem that we're trying to solve. So that brings me to this other kingdom, right? So if you don't want to use plants and you don't want to use animals, there's one more kingdom. And of course, Pam, I'm talking about the F word, fungi. But I'm not talking about mushrooms, right? I'm talking about microscopic fungi. Sometimes it's called mycelium or mycoprotein, which is like the root-like structure of fungi that basically blankets the earth. And at the Better Meat Co., what we do is run a fermentation process that enables us to, within a matter of mere hours, create from microscopic fungi a meat-type product that naturally, on its own, straight out of the fermenter, comes out with a very convincing meat-like texture, more protein than eggs, more iron than beef, more zinc than beef. And so you get all these things about meat that you want, the craveable texture, the iron, the protein, the zinc, but you don't get the things about meat that you don't want, the saturated fat, the cholesterol, the greenhouse, so many greenhouse gas emissions, animal abuse, and more. And so we are making a product that in its whole food, all natural, single ingredient state really is a amazingly nutritious and delicious food that does not need to wait until the 2030s to be commercialized. We can scale it right now. And so that's what we're pursuing at the Better Meat Co. Instead of going big with animal agriculture, we're going small with microbial agriculture. And the way that we are doing it is by growing microbes inside of fermenters that enable us to produce some of the most sustainable, most efficient, most cost-effective, and most delicious protein the world has ever seen.
Okay. Well, Paul, that is quite the overview of what you're doing, and sounds like the innovation here is really exciting. Plant-based alternatives have really been historically what we've looked at. But to your point, they're also really highly processed. I mean, you talked about, using pea protein, but then it can't just be pea protein. You've got to add and manipulate and process quite a bit. So that's, I don't know that a lot of people think about that with the plant-based alternatives.
Yeah, and so first of all, Pam, I agree, but let me just say, like, first of all, plant-based meat is better for you than animal-based meat, generally speaking. It has no cholesterol, it typically has way more fiber, like there's all these benefits to it. But what you're saying is right. It's not made from whole foods, right? Like typically, like think about what you're talking about with pea protein. Let's just say, how do you get it, right? You got to grow a field of peas, you got to harvest a field of peas, mill it into a flour. That flour is very low in protein. So then you've got to strip out the fiber, strip out the fat, and you concentrate it down into a pea protein powder that maybe like an athlete might take as a supplement or something like that. But then, even though you've got a very highly proteinaceous powder, it's not textured like animal meat. So then you got to subject it to extrusion, which is a fancy way of saying lots of pressure, lots of heat. And that changes the molecular structure of the protein so that you get your hero ingredient, which is called texturized pea protein. And then you need to add other ingredients to that in order to turn it into something like a Beyond Burger. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Beyond Burgers. I eat them. I think it's a great product. But the point is that it's sold at much higher prices than conventional beef because of all the reasons that I just noted. If you were just selling a pea burger, it would be cheaper than beef. And so our goal at the Better Meat Co. is to figure out, which we have, how to grow whole food, single ingredient alternative meats that rival animal products on protein, iron, zinc, and importantly, have that craveable meat-like texture. And that is what we have done by harnessing the power of fungi fermentation.
Yeah, and that's the exciting part, I think, because you're not an either or situation. You're and like we have the plant-based alternatives, and those are great alternatives to your point, nutritionally, et cetera. There's a lot of positive benefits to that. However, you're in an and situation. You're adding on based on innovation. You found yet another way to mimic meat. And in a way that the nutritional profile is very good and even superior to some others, obviously, from what you said. I mean, I don't know all the numbers, but the protein and the zinc, some of the reasons why people eat meat nutritionally are found in your resulting product.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, I like plant-based meat. I'm just saying it's not the only way to do it, and it may not even be the best way to do it. The end is the same. It's kind of, again, like let's say solar energy or wind energy, right? Like when you walked into the room this morning, Pam, you flicked on the light switch and you did not probably even contemplate for 1 second the source of the light. You didn't wonder, is this coming from oil or coal or solar or wind? Like you just wanted light. You wanted an illuminated room. And the same is so here. When most people eat meat, they're not thinking, I'm so glad an animal was slaughtered for this, right? Most people who eat meat are just thinking that they like the taste of it, right? And that is what we're trying to get to, how to recreate that experience. And the vast majority of the way that people have been doing that now for decades is with plant-based protein isolates. But I would posit that by using fungi proteins or mycoproteins, that there is a better way. There's a way that you can do it that involves less processing, that involves better nutrition, and importantly, is a whole food that you don't have to subject it to all these different things, that you can have a whole food that outperforms animal-based meat. And so in my view, what we're doing is not merely mimicking the experience of meat, but we're actually improving upon it, creating something that's even better. And if you look at the ways that animals have been displaced in the economy in the past, it usually is not from mimicry. It's not like Henry Ford made a mechanical horse that ran faster, right? He made an engine that was way better than a horse. And the same goes for so many other things. Like for thousands of years, we wrote letters by live plucking geese, right? Like by using quills that were being plucked out of geese's bodies. And nobody stopped, right? Because they cared about geese. They stopped because metal fountain pens were invented. And it was a way better way to write. It was way more convenient than using a quill. And that's why we don't use quills anymore. And so all these ways that animals and their use have been displaced in our economy usually is not through mimicry, but rather by some improvement, something that renders the old way obsolete. And that is what we are trying to do.
Exciting. And thank you for those examples to help our audience visualize exactly what you're talking about. And I love the improving upon claim in a lot of different ways. And I think you mentioned also in the beginning about cultured meat being different from what you're doing. Could you, because that's a fairly new term to our audience, could you distinguish between what you're doing and the cultured meat so they might be able to understand?
Sure. So, what is often called cultured meat or cultivated meat or even sometimes clean meat, that's real, actual animal meat, right? It's grown from animal cells. So it's not coming from animal slaughter, right? It's coming from animal cells that have been isolated and grown outside of the animal's body. I've eaten this many times myself. I think it's wonderful. It's so cool. But I lament that it is not ready to make a dent in the problem. So what we do is, we don't have anything of any animal origin, right? We're growing things from the fungi kingdom. So we are growing food inside of stainless steel vessels, just like they are. But what we're growing are microbial fungi. What they're growing are actual animal cells. Now, that's the difference. One other difference, though, is what we're doing is scalable today. It is literally scalable today. We could be churning out millions of pounds of the mycoprotein that we grow here at the Better Meat Co. To get to a place where a cultivated meat company is going to be producing millions of pounds of product annually, again, you're talking about the 2030s, not the 2020s. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that there is some big breakthrough that proves that prediction wrong. But it doesn't look likely that I'm wrong about that. It looks likely that if we're going to have cultivated meat on a fast food menu someplace in the way that we currently, like, you go to Burger King today, you can get an Impossible Whopper, right? And that is amazing. And it's enabled by a scalable solution. Their solution at Impossible is soybeans, right? And so that is something that's scalable today. Cultivated meat could not go on every Burger King's menu at this time, unfortunately.
Yeah, exciting because you are commercially viable right now
That's right.
and looking to scale that up, like you were saying, because timing is important. All that I hear about some of these alternatives and in the protein transition, I'll call it, to having other alternatives to slaughtering animals and some of the effects that has on the animals, the planet, et cetera, as you spoke about in the beginning, timing is important. Now is better than later. And
Yeah.
so to that point, the speed of this fermentation process is very fast.
Yeah. So Pam, let me just affirm what you're saying. Imagine that you were in a boat and the boat sprang a leak and you thought, okay, when's the best time? Should I start fixing this now or wait an hour? And obviously it's much better to start now and you have much less problem to clean up than if you wait an hour. And the same is so with the emissions that we're putting into the atmosphere today. Now, of course, many people, when they think about emissions, they think about fossil fuels like oil and coal, but there's a huge amount of emissions that come from animal agriculture. A massive amount of emissions coming from animal agriculture. And so it's imperative that we don't wait in order to start solving this problem. Now, that does not mean that we shouldn't be investing in these other technologies. I believe that we should be, but I'm just saying they can't be to the exclusion of the other technologies that are ready to scale today. Now, in terms of time, think about a cow. A cow you have to feed for a year and a half before you get a steak. A pig you have to feed for 5 months before you get pork chops. Chickens you have to feed for 40 days before you get nuggets. In our case, from the time that we inoculate our fermenter to the time that we harvest our fermenter is less than one single day.
That's
Less than
amazing.
a day. Yep.
Hold on a minute.
So this is really the most efficient way that I can think of that we could be producing some type of meat-like protein because it happens so quickly and it is so delicious and so nutritious that inherently it is just a superior method. It's kind of like the engine to the horse. Like anybody would prefer it because it's so much obviously better.
Absolutely. And so that's why you're already commercially supplying your product and are looking to expand that. What are your next steps at the Better Meat Co., Paul?
So we currently run a 9,000 liter fermentation system here in Sacramento, and that's fantastic. It's big. It's like a 3-story tall fermenter. Unfortunately, that's not enough to make the dent that we want to make. If we want to be producing millions of pounds of the mycoprotein that we are so enthusiastic about, we need to raise the capital to build a full-scale commercial factory. That's going to take a few tens of millions of dollars. So what we're going to do is go out to the market and fundraise to raise the capital necessary to commercialize the mycoprotein that we grow. The technology is invented. The patents are already secured. The customer demand is already proven out. The only thing left for us to do is to scale. And so after we raise the capital necessary to build a full-scale commercial fermentation plant, we will unleash a river of mycoprotein to flow through the food industry to slash humanity's footprint on the planet and achieve our goal of making the Earth look greener from outer space. The number one cause of deforestation is animal agriculture. And by reducing our reliance on animals for food, we can literally make the Earth look greener from space. That's what we at the Better Meat Co. are seeking to do. And if anybody listening wants to join us on that mission, I'd urge them to get in touch with us. Our website is bettermeat.co. Again, bettermeat.co. And we want to hear from you. Let's work together to make a better food system.
Absolutely. We will have the links in the show notes on YouTube as well as on all the podcast channels. And we really appreciate you being here with us to share what's happening at the Better Meat Co. and the innovation that you're taking advantage of. It's very exciting. And I look forward to reading the end of the Build Your Adventure book that you're creating here to make the planet greener from outer space. I love that end of the story. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go, Paul?
Pam, I absolutely love your analogy there of build your own adventure. When I was a kid, I loved those, to choose your own adventure books. They were so much fun to read. And we are building our own adventure. Unlike an author writing a choose your own adventure book, though, we are not the sole authors. There's so many factors that occur in the world beyond our control that affect what happens in this story. But like you, I very much want to read what happens in the end. I would love to know what happens in the end. So stay tuned. We can't wait to make that story happen. And I'm grateful for all you're doing, Pam, to promote future foods and make them not so future. We want to make it so that the things that were in the Jetsons in the past actually come to fruition today. And that's what we're working on.
This is true. And thank you to the Future Foodcast team for getting guests like Paul with us on our show. Please subscribe and comment. Let us know what you think. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.